Okay, so this is what I've been thinking about. I've been kind of wondering whether our processes for entrepreneurship actually substantially make us less creative, both at our IT and possibly even as a species, at least in America. So the thing that got me thinking about this was, I'm the director of magic. I'm supposed to think about creativity. And I started to think about, well, who are the most creative people I know? And they're all children. All right? And that was both great and somewhat depressing. And I started to think about, well, the neat thing about creativity, especially as a child, is that there's really no rules and no boundaries, right? You can start with a stealth fighter plan and wind up with that thing, right? And that thing is awesome, right? We don't judge it poorly because it didn't come out to spec, okay? And then, you dig into this and you start to think, well, okay, so there's lots of ideas floating around, and when you start to read the business literature, when you start to think about the creative economy, right, ideas are the things that create value, right? It's that spark, it's that idea. The more of those we can have, the better, if we really want to reach both our economic potential and our creative potential and our human potential, so on and so forth, okay? And then I started to think about my environment, and I live at a university, and I see lots of great and wonderful students running around, and they all have 1,000,001 ideas, and some of them are even good ideas, right? But the number of things that actually rise above the surface is very, very small, right? The number of things we even actually just finish are very, very small, right? And sometimes those are for good reasons, right? I'm a ruthless designer. I have a black t-shirt. I like to, cut things out and make sure that, we're not wasting time on things that aren't going to, produce, right? But sometimes it's not for real reasons, right? Sometimes it's for silly reasons. And I was following my Twitter stream a little while ago, and somebody tweeted that we live in an age where it's easier to put an astronaut in space than it is to figure out the legal rights for what happens when they beam a David Bowie cover back to Earth and put it on YouTube. So the first thing I figured out was creativity is not equal to entrepreneurship. That's programming slang. All right? And I know this because I very facetiously and sarcastically went out to the fount of all human knowledge, Wikipedia, and typed in their words and looked up their definitions and made some wordles about comparing them. And so the neat thing about that is that, A, you can't define entrepreneurship without using the word entrepreneurship, which is sort of strange. But the thing that really gets you, right, is that there are lots of models, but a lot of times they'll look at this and they'll say, well, creativity is an act or an art or a skill, and entrepreneurship is a process, right? There's a methodology, so on and so forth, right? And making things has become very cheap, and we can distribute them very cheaply, and so we like to romanticize, right, entrepreneurship and creativity. It's a better narrative if the person starting a business, if the person figuring out how to make a profit, put a product in a marketplace is the same person that has the big idea, right, and that has the passion behind it. We really want, right, Jobs to have invented the Mac, right, just individually, right? It's a better narrative, okay? And we like to romanticize that narrative into something that looks like somebody has a great idea, they eat a lot of ramen noodles, they pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and then all of a sudden there's money, okay? And that will just kind of take off forever, right? Great, growth, okay? But then I started thinking back to art school. Right? And I started thinking about this guy, Jackson Pollock, right? Who said, the painting has a life of its own, and he tries to kind of get out of his own way and let the painting come through. And what's interesting about that is that I've known a lot of artists, and you generally ask them what their motivation is, and very few of them come back with, I wanted to make a lot of money. Okay? There was never a business plan for what it looked like to drip paint. Okay? There was never a market analysis of whether or not this stuff was going to be successful, right? At least that's what I like to believe. We can debate that. But it comes down to a question of motivation, right? Why are we doing the things that we're doing? This is an example from a game called rocket jumping, and rocket jumping came to be by somebody figuring out that the goals of a game were to get to the end of the game alive in the shortest amount of time possible. And so you would take your rocket launcher and fire it at your feet, and that would propel you faster and farther than the game thought you could move. You would sort of skip over everything and then win, okay? And great, you won. And we look at that and we think, how innovative, right? How empowering, way to see the world from a different point of view, and we want to hire that person, right? That person's going to make a great CEO, right? But I've played against people that do that, and it's not any fun to play the game. And after you've rocket jumped through it once or twice, it's not any fun when you play the game, right? You're not having fun like the people on the right. And so is the goal of the game to win, or is the goal of the game to have fun? They're both motivations, but which one do we ascribe to our passions and what we're doing? So I'm kind of thinking now about startup as a spectrum, that different people need different things, okay? Sometimes the best thing you can do is give somebody some resources and some time and some money and ability to think, and then run away, and they're going to produce great things. And other times, if you do that, then you just lost a suitcase full of money, pretty much. And so you kind of want to work back and forth across what's that equation and what does it look like, right? What are the motivations of what we're trying to do? Starting to look at it as a service, all right? Think of startups not as here's one individual startup and another individual startup, right? But rather as a service that anybody can tap into and use for a while, right? To help them realize the thing that they're working on. So we're doing this at RIT. I'm the director of Magic. But basically what we're after is we're trying to combine the tenets of maker culture and creative communities and mix that through profits and nonprofits and startups all at the same time, right? To create kind of this morass soup that allows people both the time and resources to actually finish something, all right, and get it out to market, right, and get it out into the world and see what people think about it and iterate on it, right? And when you look at knowledge production, right, you look at teams and iteration are the big factors, right? It's not the lone genius in a closet somewhere that has an epiphany, right? So it's this idea of the creative collective, right? This idea that we really can take some time out of our day to be children, in a certain sense, right? And the reason that we can do that is unique. The reason we can do that at a university or through a government agency or through a collection of businesses or through various types of sponsorship, right? The reason we can do that is that our core business is not what we're doing, right? Our core business is education, so we can play with these things on the side, right? We want to look at removing the adult limiters, all right, for people doing new and innovative things, all right? We want to make it easier to get out there. And when I think about that, I think back to my favorite Jackson Pollock quote of all time. He sort of famously said in an interview in New York that it's his role and responsibility as an artist to get out of his own way so that work can be produced. And that's what we're after. Thank you.